Rest, pause, training, and other intensity techniques should be used sparingly. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. This is a topic we're talking about because it's just something I do a little more of these days. I used to be really into this kind of training when I was much younger, and for a while I kind of said, I don't know about it. And then as I've coached longer and done this years and years, and as I've gone to lower training volumes, I've of course kind of gravitated back towards this sort of training. But one of the things I used to do when I was younger, and it probably didn't help with my recovery and other stuff, was, do too much of it. Like where we would come in, like, let's do drop sets on 3 sets in a row. Let's do rest, pause, or force reps on 3 sets in a row. I even did that on machine work when I was younger. Like literally having another big lifter I knew was over there doing like an incline hammer strength after benching, where you come in and do some rest pause and then some force reps and them strip weights off. And then, all of this, there's a point where, and do it 3 sets in a row, right? There's a point I would say to people, maybe if you're really young and things, you might get away with that for a while, but it's going to beat you up in overtraining, right? It's going to just make you overtrain. And when we come to these sort of intensity techniques, we need to think of them in terms of just using them as finishers, using them as finishing exercises on movements that you've gone to failure on, right? Or you stopped just short of failure on something that's not safe, like an incline bench, a bench press, a squat, things you don't want to hit true failure on, okay? Because then you're not going to be able to do them anyways. But, exercises like that, sure, if you want to do maybe a drop set or a couple rest pause reps, sure, perfectly fine. But we have to look at them and go, do we really need to do these on every set? And I'm going to say no. Get within 0 reps in reserve or go to failure on most of your sets. If you do that, you're going to be in a really good place. You're going to be in a really good place in terms of your training, okay? You're going to be getting probably the most possible stimulus on a set-for-set basis. Okay, so then the topic comes up of why would we then use these intensity techniques? It is purely to make sure that you got the last couple muscle fibers. And we need to be clear, when we are adding something like this, it's not going to give us enormous amounts of difference. It is purely training with a little bit of insurance policy of going, I just want to make sure in case there's a couple muscle fibers that maybe I didn't fatigue, going back and getting them, maybe some of the intermediate. And I think particularly when we do lower reps, okay, when we're under 10 reps, you're down in that 5 to 8 rep range. It can make a little more sense to use something like this on the last set. Why? Because what happens, we didn't work as many of the intermediate fibers fully multiple times to fatigue. Because usually when we're doing a little bit more rep work, where they have a few more reps before they get fatigued, and then we're going to the higher threshold motor units, and then when those are exhausted, we have to go back to those little bit of intermediate fibers again. Okay? But we can't lift them because they were too exhausted when we got to the highest threshold motor units. But think about it from this perspective. Most of our growth as advanced lifters comes from our fast twitch fibers. But we can get a little bit from those intermediates. And so in that case, we might look at them and go, we're just coming back in. And maybe our fastest twitch muscle fibers are no longer working. And they're not. If you do a drop set or you do rest pause training, we need to be clear. Those fibers are probably not firing again. You're back to a little bit a hair slower, like that very next tier down is what you're using on those, okay? But there may be just a little bit of muscle growth there, okay? So if we're chasing 100% hypertrophy, just like the people are like, I do 25 sets because I want that 1% possible hypothetical more growth, okay? This falls into the same category but with less time commitment, right? Because that's all you're chasing. Maybe a few of those fibers that didn't get work were just coming in and trying to get them. Okay? But do you need a lot of it to do that? No. 1 or 2 sets in a whole workout, right? Maybe 1 per muscle. So like for some of my workouts, like I might do it on a last set of the incline, maybe a rest pause. Okay? Maybe a rest pause. maybe you could do a drop set or a rest pause or something on your last tricep exercise. Or your last set. You could do it on a couple, but again, I'm going to point out you want to do these things sparingly. You want to do them sparingly. Why? Why? Because you'll get overtrained. And we have to think in terms of force production. We have to think in terms of nervous system. You know, it's been noted that sometimes doing this sort of stuff, if we're not careful, taking a bunch of sets to failure, for example, can be a little bit of a problem on the nervous system side for strength. Okay? If we're trying to maximize strength a little bit. But I always point out if we lift heavy enough, we're going to get strong anyways. So all we're doing with this is chasing a little bit of hypertrophy, and it's probably not in your fibers with the most growth potential. Okay? It's probably not. Again, it's just some of those intermediate fibers. It's not even people say, oh, we're trying to get to those deepest fibers. No, you get that with a fresh exercise. You get that going to failure. Those intensity techniques are not hitting those, because those have already been hit and they're exhausted usually. We're coming back down that chain on the other end. And it may be worth 0.5%. Maybe 1% more gains plotted over time to do some of them here and there. It's going to be a very small amount. The same reason people will come in and add 10 extra sets, hoping, chasing that little elusive bit. That's all we're doing. But we do need to be aware, just like adding a bunch of volume, it can be tough on your recovery. Right? It can be tough on your peripheral nervous system. It can be tough on the recovery level of things like your calcium ion situation, the muscular level, right? It can create a lot of fatigue, so be aware of that and think about it and say, okay, if I'm going to come in and use this as a technique to get that last bit, but it can be hard on recovery, let's not overdo it. Because it can push you into an overtrained or an overreach condition easier if you're not careful. So again, one of these tools that can be useful. It can be useful for getting just a little bit more. It can be a valuable tool. But it's a tool that if you overuse it, it can be a problem. If you're doing too much volume and you do it, it's definitely going to be a problem. Again, you've got to look at it and say, what am I trying to get out of it? Am I doing really intense, moderate reps, moderately low training, but I want to make sure I get these fibers. I want to make sure I'm not losing anything by not doing a lot more volume. So maybe we'll come through and do this stuff just to kind of hit some of those fibers we might get had we added more sets. And that's all you're trying to do with it. Too much of it will beat you into the ground. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.